King Charles has accused Queen Camilla for trying to manipulate his test results given by the doctor. Welcome viewers to my channel. Please subscribe, like my video, and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next update. The morning light in Clarence's house filtered softly through the tall windows, casting long shadows across the study where King Charles often spent his most solitary hours. Outside, London hummed with the rhythms of everyday life, oblivious to the storm brewing behind these walls. Within, Charles moved deliberately through the routines that had structured his life for decades: the quiet breakfast, the careful review of correspondence, the methodical attention to his health records. Each action, while seemingly mundane, carried with it the weight of someone whose life was lived in perpetual scrutiny, where even private moments felt laden with consequence. Charles had always understood the duality of his existence. He was a man of flesh and blood, capable of vulnerability, fear, and doubt. Yet he was also a symbol, a living emblem of a centuries-old institution that demanded composure, wisdom, and an almost superhuman restraint. Navigating this balance had never been simple. But now, with the suspicion of manipulation clouding his mind, it became a precarious tightrope walk. He could feel the tension in his muscles, a subtle stiffness in his shoulders, as though his body itself was bracing against the uncertainty that had settled into his thoughts. His mornings often began with reflection, a private ritual in which he reviewed documents, health updates, and personal notes. Today, however, reflection was no longer a neutral exercise. It had transformed into a meticulous investigation, a quiet interrogation of the evidence that had ignited his unease. The test results were still spread across the desk, charts and reports carefully aligned. He had gone through them repeatedly, comparing them with previous assessments, noting every discrepancy, every statistical anomaly. At first, he had tried to dismiss the feeling, attributing it to a fleeting moment of paranoia or the natural stress of public duties. But the inconsistencies persisted, and with them the knowing thought that someone extremely close, might have intervened. The possibility was almost unthinkable. Charles had spent decades cultivating a sense of discernment, learning to navigate both the overt and the subtle manipulations that often accompanied life in the royal spotlight. Yet now that same vigilance turned inward, directed at the person he had trusted implicitly. Camilla had long been his confidant, his partner in navigating the intricacies of public and private life. Her influence had been steady, sometimes quietly decisive, shaping decisions and conversations with a light but firm touch. In many ways, he had relied on her judgment more than anyone else's. And yet, the very closeness that had once been a source of comfort now carried the potential for betrayal. As he sat in the study, Charles's mind drifted through the intricate web of interactions that had unfolded over the past weeks. He remembered the conversations about appointments with specialists, the subtle suggestions about which test results he should review first, the occasional offhand comment that, in hindsight, hinted at a nudge toward particular conclusions. Each moment alone seemed insignificant, a mere ripple in the larger rhythm of daily life. Taken together, however, they formed a pattern that he could no longer ignore. His intuition, honed by years of observing people and circumstances, screamed that something was amiss. Yet it was not only suspicion that occupied his thoughts. There was also a profound sense of vulnerability, a recognition that the very nature of human health could be uncertain, fragile, and easily manipulated. A king might be surrounded by advisors, doctors, and aides, but in matters of the body, he was just as susceptible as any other person. The realization was humbling, almost painfully human, and it underscored the stakes of the moment. If the test results had been altered, whether intentionally or accidentally, it was not merely a question of information. It was a question of agency, of control over decisions that could affect not just his own life, but the legacy he would leave behind. The room was silent, except for the occasional creak of the wooden floorboards and the faint ticking of a grandfather clock in the corner. In these quiet intervals, Charles's mind often wandered to the past, to memories of his own upbringing and the formative experiences that had shaped his approach to trust and vigilance. He remembered the early lessons in observation taught by his parents, the careful attention to detail expected in royal education, and the unspoken understanding that appearances could be deceiving. These memories reinforced his current determination. He would seek clarity piece by piece until every question was addressed and every uncertainty resolved. Even in the solitude of the study, Charles's thoughts were never truly private. The presence of Camilla loomed large in his mind, her influence subtly woven into every aspect of the household, and increasingly into his reflections on the test results. He wondered what she might say if confronted, how she might defend herself, and whether the trust that had been the foundation of their relationship could survive a challenge of this magnitude. The questions were unrelenting, and each answer he imagined seemed to open a new corridor of doubt. At the same time, he recognized the complexity of human motives. Interference with test results could stem from concern as easily as from ambition. Camilla's role in his life had always been multifaceted: lover, partner, strategist, confidant. Determining intent was a delicate endeavor, requiring not only scrutiny of facts, but also an understanding of character, temperament, and the intricate dance of influence that had long characterized their marriage. Charles knew that accusations could not be made lightly. Any misstep could irreparably damage both personal trust and public perception. As the day progressed, he began organizing meetings with his medical team, not in confrontation, but in careful inquiry. He sought to verify every detail, to understand the sequence of events, to ensure that the integrity of his health records was beyond reproach. This process, though procedural in appearance, carried enormous emotional weight. Each question asked, each clarification sought, was a step along a path fraught with personal tension. In the quiet corners of his mind, Charles grappled with the paradox of power and vulnerability. As king, he wielded authority unmatched in scope. As man, he faced uncertainty that no title could dispel. In moments of reflection, Charles also considered the broader implications of the situation. The monarchy depended not only on the perception of strength and stability, but on the belief that decisions were made with honesty and clarity. A breach of trust, even in private matters, could ripple outward, undermining confidence and inspiring speculation among courtiers, advisors, and the public alike. The awareness of this delicate balance heightened the intensity of his scrutiny. He knew that a resolution was not merely a personal necessity, but a matter of institutional consequence. By evening, Charles had constructed a meticulous timeline of events, tracing each interaction, appointment, and comment related to his medical evaluations. He noted patterns, anomalies, and subtle inconsistencies, all the while maintaining a disciplined composure. The room, once merely a space of routine, had transformed into a theater of inquiry, a place where intellect, intuition, and emotional acuity intersected in the pursuit of truth. The king, accustomed to navigating crises of national significance, now confronted a more intimate, emotionally charged challenge, one that demanded the same rigor, but carried far more personal weight. Through this process, Charles's resolve began to crystallize. He would not allow fear or suspicion to fester unchecked. He would seek clarity, engage with trusted advisors, and when necessary, confront the questions that weighed on his heart. The private world of the king, once a space of quiet reflection, had become a crucible in which loyalty, love, and trust were tested. And within that crucible, the first real steps toward uncovering the truth and understanding the intentions behind the shadow of doubt were being carefully, deliberately taken. In the solitude of the palace, amid the portraits of predecessors who had navigated their own trials, Charles felt the full gravity of his position. The interplay of personal and public responsibilities, of vulnerability and authority, created a tension that was at once exhausting and exhilarating. He understood that the path ahead would be fraught with emotional complexity, with moments that would test his patience, insight, and empathy. Yet, he also understood that this journey, painful, intricate, and profoundly human, was unavoidable. To confront the uncertainty, to parse the truth from possibility, and to reconcile trust with suspicion was not just a personal imperative, but a duty to the institution he represented, and to the people who placed their faith in him. By the time the day drew to a close, Charles had settled into a quiet determination. The private world of the king was no longer simply a sanctuary. It was a space of vigilance, a place where observation, reflection, and emotional intelligence converged. In that convergence lay the hope of understanding, the possibility of clarity, and the first stirrings of a story that would unfold in ways both intimate and public, revealing not only the complexities of a marriage, but the intricate tapestry of power, responsibility, and human vulnerability at the heart of modern monarchy. Chapter 2: Camilla's Influence. The queen consort, Camilla, had long been a figure both admired and scrutinized, a woman whose presence in the royal household carried as much subtle weight as it did public visibility. Unlike the sweeping drama often associated with royal entrances and state occasions, her influence operated quietly through observation, counsel, and the nuanced management of relationships that framed the monarchy's inner workings. To many she was simply supportive, steadfast, and reliable, a partner to King Charles in both life and duty. Yet beneath that veneer of calm composure lay a complexity that few fully appreciated, one shaped by decades of navigating public suspicion, personal ambition, and the delicate dynamics of a family whose history was as much legend as reality. From the outset of their partnership, Camilla had shown an instinct for strategy, a subtle understanding of when to speak and when to remain silent. These were skills honed not in the gilded corridors of palaces, but in the crucible of lived experience, growing up under public attention, weathering societal scrutiny, and learning the sometimes cruel arithmetic of reputation and influence. Her decisions were rarely impulsive. A single phrase in conversation, a carefully timed suggestion, or a gently insistent recommendation could shift outcomes in ways that were almost imperceptible to outsiders. Charles had often admired this skill, relying on her judgment to navigate matters both large and small, trusting her to temper his impulses and guide his attention to what truly mattered. Yet influence, even when wielded with care, carries with it inherent tension. The more closely Camilla operated within Charles's personal and professional spheres, the more opportunity there was for perceptions of control or manipulation to arise. In the intimate world of their relationship, where trust had long been the foundation, even minor interventions could be magnified, their intent misread, their consequences unforeseen. Over the years, Charles had come to understand that Camilla's guidance, while often beneficial, was not always free of the potential for friction, particularly when it intersected with matters that touched the core of his independence and personal agency. Her involvement in his health, which had recently become a source of tension, illustrated this dynamic in stark terms. Camilla had always been attentive, ensuring that he adhered to appointments, reviewed medical advice, and took appropriate precautions. In ordinary circumstances, such attentiveness would have been a blessing. But when Charles began noticing subtle inconsistencies in his test results, the very attentiveness he had once valued became a lens through which he examined potential interference. The line between care and control, between partnership and intrusion, blurred in ways that were emotionally charged and deeply personal. Charles's reflections often returned to the small gestures that hinted at Camilla's influence, a casual suggestion about how he should approach a conversation with his doctor, a reminder to question particular findings, a soft insistence that he prioritize certain appointments over others. Each in isolation could be interpreted as concern or support. Taken together, however, they formed a pattern that demanded careful consideration. He had trained himself to read patterns in both politics and personal relationships, and the repetition of these interventions could no longer be dismissed as coincidence or habit. At the same time, Charles was acutely aware of the broader pressures on Camilla herself. As queen consort, her role was under constant observation. Every interaction she had, every decision she influenced, was subject to public and private scrutiny alike. Her position required a careful balance between visibility and subtlety, between advocacy and restraint. To exert influence too overtly risked criticism and scandal. To exert it too lightly risked ineffectiveness. Charles understood these pressures, and he recognized that her interventions, whatever their intent, might be shaped as much by circumstance as by personal desire. Despite the tension that had arisen, Charles's understanding of Camilla was layered with empathy. He could appreciate the complexity of her position, the necessity of engagement, and the difficulty of maintaining influence without overstepping boundaries. Their marriage had endured scrutiny, personal loss, and decades of public expectation. Within that history lay a shared recognition of both the fragility and the resilience of their partnership. Yet now that history was intersecting with a new, more delicate challenge, the perception that guidance might have crossed into manipulation, and that the line between partnership and interference had been imperceptibly breached. In the quieter moments of the day, Charles often observed Camilla from a distance, noting the careful poise with which she conducted herself in private meetings, the gentle insistence she exhibited in family discussions, the understated yet unmistakable authority she wielded in managing the household. Her influence was pervasive yet subtle, woven into the very fabric of the palace's daily rhythms. It was impossible to ignore and increasingly impossible to interpret without questioning the underlying motives. Every interaction became a test of perception, every conversation a delicate negotiation between trust and suspicion. Charles's reflections extended beyond the domestic sphere into the public dimension of Camilla's influence. She had over the years become a figure of strategic importance in the monarchy, navigating charitable engagements, public appearances, and media interactions with a deftness that often shielded him from unnecessary criticism. This competence had long been a source of relief and even admiration. Yet, as he scrutinized her role in matters of health and personal decision-making, the very competence he had relied upon now invited caution. Authority and influence, he realized, could never be entirely separated from perception, and in a monarchy that lived and breathed on public image, perception could be as consequential as reality. Amid these reflections, Charles recognized the emotional undercurrent that complicated their partnership. Influence within marriage is never neutral. It is a form of power, subtle but potent, and always intertwined with affection, loyalty, and the shared history that binds two people together. To question influence is not merely to examine action, but to probe intention, which is far more delicate and fraught. The emotional stakes were heightened by their decades-long bond, which had been tested repeatedly by personal tragedy, public scrutiny, and the relentless demands of royal life. Now, for the first time in many years, Charles felt that bond under strain not from external forces but from the shadow of doubt cast by one he had trusted implicitly. He recalled the long evenings at Hirove where private conversation had flowed into reflection on the pressures of their roles, the ambitions of the family, and the challenges of balancing personal desires with public duty. Camilla had always been a partner in these discussions, shaping decisions and influencing outcomes with insight and discretion. Yet, in the context of his recent medical concerns, those same discussions now carried a different weight. Each suggestion, once framed as guidance, could be interpreted as an attempt to steer, to influence, to shape decisions in ways that might compromise autonomy. The tension was subtle, almost imperceptible, but for Charles, trained in observation and attuned to nuance, it could not be ignored. He found himself oscillating between empathy and suspicion. On one hand, he acknowledged the legitimacy of her concern and the wisdom that had guided her actions for decades. On the other, he confronted the possibility that even well-intentioned influence might have overstepped intentionally or not. The challenge was not merely factual. It was profoundly emotional. How could he reconcile love, trust, and respect with the gnawing uncertainty that had arisen in the most private of spheres? How could he navigate a relationship where influence might be both a gift and a source of tension, where guidance could simultaneously protect and constrain? In these contemplative hours, Charles began to recognize the broader significance of Camilla's influence, not only within their marriage, but across the monarchy itself. Her guidance shaped decisions, impacted public perception, and even subtly affected the functioning of the household. Understanding her influence was not merely an exercise in personal reflection. It was a matter of discerning how authority, trust, and interpersonal dynamics intersected in ways that could have lasting consequences for both the family and the institution. By the end of the day, Charles had developed a nuanced understanding. Camilla's influence was a complex, multifaceted force, one that could not be reduced to simple labels of benevolence or manipulation. It was at once supportive and potentially intrusive, stabilizing and challenging, subtle yet pervasive. Recognizing this complexity was the first step in addressing the emotional and practical challenges he faced. In the quiet of the evening, as shadows deepened across the study and the palace settled into a rare calm, Charles contemplated the path ahead. He would need to navigate this terrain carefully, balancing inquiry with empathy, vigilance with compassion, and observation with reflection. The influence of the queen consort, so vital to the functioning of both their marriage and the monarchy, could no longer be viewed purely as a source of guidance. It was a force to be understood, respected, and, if necessary, scrutinized. Within that understanding lay the potential for resolution, clarity, and the preservation of both personal trust and institutional integrity. The private world of the king and the influence of the queen consort had converged in a way that demanded careful, deliberate action. Charles knew that how he approached this situation would shape not only the future of their relationship, but also the perception of the monarchy in the eyes of the world. In that realization lay the gravity of the moment, a delicate, emotionally charged intersection of love, trust, power, and perception that would define the unfolding story in